Okay. So, what was the question?
So the question is that many people say that after the time of Mashiach, that things will change. There'll be no Karbanos. There'll be no certain Chagim won't exist anymore. How is it possible if the Torah says that these are mitzvos and that the Torah can never change?
Okay.
During the time of Mashiach. After the time of Mashiach.
So the only thing that, from what you just said, that I'm familiar with at all, that might be what you're referring to, is where there's a chazal that say that the Yom Tovim, on some level, maybe atidin libatel, except for Hanukkah and Purim. And the Mefarshim talk about this. But my question is, who says that we're not going to have a temple? Do you say that we're not going to have a temple? There's not going to be a
temple. We won't have Karbanos.
How do we know that? From where?
Other people say. I never saw.
So that's what I say too.
Yeah.
I want to hear from a source a real question that we could grapple with. Where does Rav Kook ever say that? And what does he say? Yes, because I've challenged people many times. There has some sort of statement about carbon mincha, but and if that's the best you could do, well, it's easy to just dismiss that because it doesn't mean anything. If somebody just says something and doesn't, like, if he's the only person, like, where does that come from? You know, there's a lot of talk. Just to digress for fun. There's a lot of talk nowadays in politics about why Christians seem to be supporting us or not. And there's a lot of talk about concern from concerned parties and American conservatives about, what are the trends of support for this Zionist initiative, and is this the support of Jews? Is this a geopolitical support? Or is this about some sort of theology? Is it troublesome to Christians, depending on what denomination you are, whether the Jews actually do have a temple or not? This is a big discussion now. And it's fascinating to me because it's come out from this that the Christians were very, very excited, to back up replacement theology with current events when it was the Roman times and we were kicked out, or throughout the pogroms. But now that we're back, it really challenges the idea that they are a replacement of ours and that God abandoned the covenant. So, there's a lot of talking heads now being interviewed in all different places as representatives of various denominations of Christianity and theology and what they believe. And there's voices of Catholicism that say that basically, Christianity is based on the idea there never will be a third temple, and it can't be, and that's never going to happen. And they say crazy things like the priestly line of Aaron has been obliterated anyway, and God's not going to restore that. And what's funny about all that is that you got to have to do so much mental gymnastics to even get that argument off the ground with Navi, because Navi always says, first of all, in the Chumash, in Sefer Devarim, that at the end of everything, God's going to take us home. And not only that, but Ezekiel, as they call him, he talks about the third temple. And he talks about the priestly order and how they're going to do stuff. And he talks about the Karbanos. And what's interesting is that Yechezkel HaNavi, his Sefer was very problematic for us for a long time because we didn't know what to do with it. Even in the days of Hillel and Shammai, the way it reports what's going to be seems very different and at odds with the Beit Medrash halachas that we had. And they didn't know what to do with it, so they wanted to be gonezet. Also, they wanted to be gonezet because it has descriptions of the Merkava, and there are all kinds of midrashim and braisos that talk about dangerous things that happened because people were learning these things. So they decided that they were going to they wouldn't be included in the official canon of Tanakh. till there was a big tzaddik whose last name was Ben Gurion. You can find him in the Mishnah in the first paragraph of Shabbos, but he's talked about in Chagiga in the second paragraph. He basically spent all night and all day for a number of nights and days in an attic somewhere. They gave him a lot of battery juice so he could just keep the lights on for a long time. And he was miyashiv. He worked out through everything to explain and how everybody could be okay. And it was accepted ultimately. But the point is that we had a problem with it because it talked about how things would be different. Meaning, obviously, things are not going to be exactly the same, or maybe they should be. Who are we to assume? In fact, we're not. If Hashem
happened 100 years ago, it's not the same.
Okay, but in terms of what the halacha dictates or demands, right? Why would one of the animaments that we say every day, if you say that, but one of the 13 animaments that the Rambam talks about is that this Torah will not be ever exchanged. So
But that doesn't mean it can't be reinterpreted.
So there's two issues here. We can, without getting Kabbalistic, because we know that the Torah has many levushim, and the levush is the emanation of God's divine Torah, which is much greater than its actual local application in our time and space universe, right? But that filters down through who we are and what we are, what time we are. So it's so that we can enact the mitzvot. But at the same time, so it has to meet us locally as a local interpretation, but still it's an eternal Torah that doesn't change. So you can cite, let's say, for example, a discussion in the Rishonim as to the nature of the Mishkan if there never would have been an Egel. Did we get a Mishkan only in response to the sin of the Egel, or did it change? You can have all these conversations, but also that was a formative time in human history where the tzura, the form of the mitzvahs, were being determined as a give and take between Am Yisrael and Hashem. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But l'maisa lahalacha, who are we to assume that something's going to be different when the Navi tells us? Then So the other issue is interpretation. You mentioned interpretation, and we say like this: that you can anything that is an interpretation or derabana or takana or gezerah, you can maybe take it off or change things if you have a Sanhedrin that's gadol b'chachma uveminyan. That means it's a greater in quality and quantity. Now I have to tell you that till Moshe Rabbeinu and his Sanhedrin come back again, you will never have a Beis Din gadol b'chachma uveminyan than the Anshe Knesset Hagdola. You had 120 people of the greats of the greats. You had Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. You had Mordechai. You had Ezra. But that would only be able to address the derabanas. But we're talking about, God said there's something called an olah. What is an olah? What fulfills an olah on a cosmic level? In Shas, you have all kinds of massive discussions. I'll give you an example. This is a beautiful discussion. Just to give you a sense of how deep these things go. There's a machloket Shammai and Hillel. I'm just going to share with you a Gemara, if you want to go on a journey, for example, just to give you. So, there's a Mishnah that everybody says that people who say Karbanot in the morning, they end off with a Mishnah and Peh, and it says, there is no mandated from the Torah maximum or minimum for the following mitzvah. HaPeah, mitzvah Peah, which has a lot to do with Shavuos in this week's Parsha. Maybe we'll talk about it one day. Okay, Bikurim, the Hareyayom. What is Reyayom?
It's the Beit Knesset Noam here.
There's actually a machloket. Is it the element of coming into the Beis Hamikdash and appearing, or the attendant karban olah that comes with it called the olat re'iyah? Okay. So the Mishnah says in Chagiga, there is that even though Minat Torah, like we said in Mishnah and Peah, there was no mandated minimum on how much you have to spend for the karban of Re'iyah, the Olah of Re'iyah, and also the karban Chagiga, because 3 times you go up to the temple and you have to bring an Olah, which is called the Re'iyah, and a Shalmei Chagiga. The Olah goes entirely on the Mizbeach, and the Chagiga is eaten by the Baal, right? And it goes on the Mizbeach.
Chagiga, it's a
Shlamim.
Shlamim.
It's a shlamim because it makes shalom between two parties, and that becomes crucial in the discussion we're going to have right now. Okay. So since there's no mandated halacha, a minimum or maximum, a shiur requirement, so Chachamim came to give you a limit, because the pasuk says, "Lo siras panai rekam." God says, "Come to see my face, but don't come empty-handed." He didn't tell you how much to bring. So Beit Shammai says you prioritize the korban olah, and the minimum that if a person has no money, you have to spend at least, even though from the Torah there's no shir, you have to spend at least 2 talents of silver for the olah, and 1 talent for the shlama. And Beis Hillel says it's reversed. You spend 2 on the shlama and 1 on the olah. So the Gemara gets into it. The Gemara says, why does Beis Hillel say what he says, and why does Beit Shammai say what he says?
And what if you don't have that much money?
So obviously, there's a whole discussion. This is the minimum. Meaning this is if you can't bring anything, we say you have to at least pay this, and I guess you'd have to borrow. I don't know. If you don't have, you don't have. I mean, look.
But they can bring a bird if you don't have money.
I'm sorry?
You can bird a bird. Bird, it doesn't cost that much money.
The problem is normally you have that's a carbon oliviore, yeah. But the chagiga, it has to be min hazvachem v'lo min ha'ofot v'lo min hamincha. But you can't be mekayim the simcha, the shamei simcha, the chagiga with a bird.
No, but all I
next time somebody you're invited out for a meal on Pesach, Shavuos, or Sukkot, and they serve you chicken, say thank you very much. But in the Beis Hamikdash, you wouldn't get away with this. Okay.
What bothers me, I don't know.
Yes.
Why we so concerned what can happen when Mashiach will come? Why we so much thing to do now when we are here?
You're going to have closing statements because you're absolutely right. We're going to get there. But first, let's have fun.
Because when Mashiach will come, we will know what we shall spend my time and energy.
Okay, so the argument is clearly not about what's going to happen, because who cares? The argument is what our attitudes should be and what we're aiming for and what God wants from us. And that seems to be what the feelings are all about.
But also,
if we could just cut to the chase. But and that's why I want to share this. But
you want to hear
what
Rabbi Chat has to say about Rav Kook?
In a second, yeah.
But I think it might be a very, very wrong. We talk about Torah. Torah, I think it's not only the written Torah, and only not the oral Torah. Torah we have now may be completely, this Torah may be included in the Torah will come, but maybe it will be much higher Torah, which includes something we don't have now.
That's the other half, right? It's not just, right. We want to believe that whatever complications that we have psychologically and emotionally about keeping the Torah in Galut, both the form we have of the Torah and the trouble that we have keeping it, we're hoping that the whole idea of the advent of a messianic age is that we're going to be able to do it a lot better at the tip-top shape, and we're going to get a whole lot more out of it. And that's why it's a question of vision here, and it's about emotions. Exactly. Yeah. It's a exactly. That's really what it's about. But really, we'd both be satisfied, hopefully, if we can put that aside and let that be adjudicated by the answer of what the Torah tells us, and then everybody will say, "Fine, I'll take that back to my base and I'll stew with it." Right. Right. Okay. So one second, you want to mention, and then I'll get back to the Gemara Chagiga. Yeah.
So he says, Rav Kook does not clearly or explicitly rule that there will be no animal sacrifices in the third temple. His language is philosophical and future-oriented, describing an ideal messianic state, not necessarily the immediate restoration of temple service.
And does he even talk about the nature of sacrifices in that quote? Or in that place, in that source?
Rav Kook, he presents a vision in which at a higher stage of human development, animal sacrifices may become unnecessary or be transformed into more spiritual forms.
A man can dream. That's totally valid. But
he says, if you want, I can pull the exact.
No, it's fine. But I'm saying to really take that and run with it, you have to have very strong feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was vegetarian.
I'm just saying, no, to take that, what you just quoted, and say that that's definitive of like with authority that God's not going to ask us, he's going to change something like that. You really have to have strong feelings to take that source and run with it. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, great, yeah, all he said was maybe there's a higher, absolutely great, okay, and we'll see when it comes. But is that a question on us, like when the time comes we're going to have a big debate on what we're going to do? Is that how things work? So, but these are still this, but we're still, let's address the feelings if we can get there.
I
Yes,
have a question.
Could you
Is
finish
there,
the Gemara thing?
I want to, yeah, but we're getting involved. So, yeah,
what was the population of Eretz Israel when in the time of Beit Knesset?
I don't have the census count.
Okay,
I did,
but it was
I don't have
way
access to
less
that
than it is
information.
now.
And-
How would
Is there
it
enough-
And
possibly be feasible for every male in Eretz Israel to
So
come to
this
Beit
is
Knesset
classic.
and do a sacrifice?
This is
It's just
classic. This is absolutely, this is logistic, this is human logistic thinking. God told me to do something, and now we're gonna have a big problem when that comes. So probably we're not gonna have to do it because it's just gonna be impossible. I mean, is that how we're thinking about things? Because somebody told me about 15 years ago when I don't know if anybody here has been to Yerushalayim, Air Kodesh recently, but they are doing crazy redirecting, building traffic, and it makes no sense. And I had a Rebbe years ago that said they don't even know why they're doing it, but I'll tell you why they're doing it, because pretty soon you're going to see that there's going to be both public transportation, automated public transportation, and great underground parking garages, all to facilitate a unprecedented pilgrimage to Harabais. And you're going to see, because God thought of all of that way in the beginning. He knew that we were going to have cars when he told us that we got to do this up. That's for him to figure out. Like, I don't have to worry about that. But if my wife, she'd be concerned because she's very practical, and that's her job. She said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Moshe Rabbeinu was told by the Sneh already that he's going to have to tell the women when they're announced that they're going to go to Har Sinai. He's got to tell the women that they got to borrow clothes. They're going to borrow clothes from the neighbors. They're going to borrow fine jewelry. Why? Because you're never going to get off the ground. The second you tell them we're going to party with God, the first thing you're going to ask is, but what are we going to wear? It's my wife makes sure that I'm worried about the kids on a practical level. I'm always dreaming, like, how do I get him to be like, a superstar? Where, I'm like out there in the air, and my wife's like, like, you got to hold his hand when you cross the street. Like,
So Rabbi, I remember my Rav in America, so Rabbi, when Mashiach will come, every Jew supposed to come to Eretz Israel. Why did they have so many airplanes? Said, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's called the Eretz
It
HaTzfi.
will be, don't worry about it now. That's it.
Chazal say it's called the Eretz HaTzfi because the hind or the deer is a very gaunt creature. I mean, it's so tight, the skin that wraps around it, and it expands, yet it expands. It's so elastic, the skin of a deer. So they say Eretz Yisrael is like that too, that it looks like it's very tsar. But if all the Jews in the world, there are a lot of Jews today that tell me, no, the Torah never had a vision of everybody living here at the same time. There has to be a yeshuv, and the Jews should be spread out everywhere.
What's that?
I don't know. People say all kinds of things. It's not a mitzvah to listen.
Yerushalayim's going to expand to all of current.
They say that they say the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael will expand to all. I'm sorry, the kedusha of Yerushalayim will expand to all of Eretz Yisrael, and the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael will expand to everywhere else. The kedusha, not necessarily the borders, but they say everybody. Am Yisrael can fit. It says in the temple, there's a coordinate in time that is beyond time, that is a portal to beyond time, and that's Shabbos. And there is a nekuda in space that transcends the limitations of space, and that's where the Shekhinah resides. And in our reality, in this point in history, that's Har Bayit. So that Chazal say they were omdim tzifufin u'mishtachavin revachim. Yeah, it's really, it's hard fitting everybody there, but ma'aseh, when everybody's there in the service of God, there's room for everybody. The kulam, all right, it says, what do we say? So there's room for everybody. When you're for God, you tolerate. There's tremendous space. Everybody has room. I was coming back from Hebron at the break of day on a bus. The first bus out, I got locked out of Marsa Machpelah overnight. I had to hang out with the soldiers. It's freezing cold, and I took the first bus back. And we're going through this whole route of Eretz Yisrael where it's like maybe 4 or 5 kilometers. There's about 20 mosques, and you hear them all at the same time because they're getting ready for it's the morning starting, and it was this cacophony. It sounded to me like they were all competing with each other. All the chazanim were trying to sound prettier or louder. It's like, why do you need everybody's blasting on that? And there's nobody in there. They're just playing the tape. I mean, there's no, and it's like, and it's so like. And I just started to think, I used to live in Katamon by the Shtibach, and you'd be sitting in one minyan, in one room, and you catch Baruch Hu, you hear Baruch Hu, and you don't even know, should I answer? Like a lot of times you like answer with that too, and it's like, wow, the Jews really care about Hashem. They want to make him happy. So like everybody's in on it. Nobody's like, my tefillah is better than his tefillah, and it's not about us. It's so cool. And they're all like, no, So I don't even know how I got on this topic. But yes. Yeah, when we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's room for everybody. And but this is even expressed in physics. It says that the dimension of the Aron that Moshe Rabbeinu was given to make the ark is greater than the dimensions of the actual Kodesh HaKodashim, which was housed. And we don't live in a world that we're used to this kind of phenomena, but I got news for you, it's 100% real, and we'll see it when it comes back. So really our concern should be to do the right thing and do what God wants. I guarantee we're not going to, I'm more than happy to eat my hat about anything I said when God tells me what the real thing is, because that's really, I don't have an agenda. I understand the difficulty, in terms of sensitivity. The Mekubalim say that people whose soul is rooted in Kayin, actually, they're supposed to have, I don't know what any of this means, but from that reason, I'll share that they're so sensitive to all chiyut that they can't, the phrase in Yiddish is, like he couldn't even hurt fly. You win says, but you can't, it's not a good feeling even to clobber that scorpion in the house, because it's God invested chiyut in that creature. But, but I think that's what it's very, I don't know how that works, but that's dafka. I think that's part of it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But, Cain was he was a shepherd. They say that he made multiple wounds in Hevel because he wasn't trying to kill him. He was trying to release the Yetzer Hara. There are people that say, I don't know. There are many ways to live. But anyway, I don't know. I'm just reporting on the facts, man.
It's also said that it was the first person who died.
Who was murdered, yeah.
Who died. It was the first person who died. Adam Arishon was still alive. Chava was still alive.
How do we know?
And those were the people. And so when he hit him, he had no idea that such a thing could happen.
He was the first person to spill blood. It says
but Hevel was the first person who died. So
yeah, but I know, but from a
someone said he was crying over him, get up, brother, get up.
Right, he didn't know, there was no precedent. Right. So there was no precedent. Also, when Adam Rishon was told the day you eat, you're going to die, he didn't even know what that meant.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally unfair.
I'm already with you full time, so what difference?
Right. So, and where is Hevel anyway? He's probably still around.
I don't know.
Hevel,
how old was Hevel when he died?
How old was he?
Yeah.
About a day, maybe a couple hours.
No, but he did not die. He was wondering. He was wondering. He did not die.
Good point.
He died many years after that, not right away.
You're right. Yeah.
It have to be at least a year.
I don't know how old he was. Maybe he was not the first person who died.
So a year later.
About it.
Yeah, because Adam Rishon was born on Rosh Hashanah. It was a year later.
I don't know. I don't know how old he was when he died. He might be not the first who died. Not necessarily.
I really want to hear the end of it.
Okay. So the Gemara says, why would Beit Shammai prioritize the Ola to be double the amount of Shlamim, and Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel would prioritize the Shlamim to be twice over the Ola? What's the fundamental argument? So
Shama's time is after Mashiach comes, so that was.
So you're saying it's gonna.
Hillel is for today. Shama's judgment is for after Mashiach, right?
They're right. We can take that into account, but I don't know. Okay, I never thought of that. And we'll see, but let's see what it's more about the reasoning that's fascinating.
No, I think
who was the two rabbis? Who was the two rabbis?
There's Shammai and Hill, or the house of Shammai and the house of Hill.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
And which said which?
Shammai said that the Ola is double, the minimal you pay for the Ola is double for the Shlamim, for the Chagiga. And Hill says the opposite. You pay double for the Chagiga and half for the Shlamim. For half of the Ola. Okay? The Gemara says, Shammai, why do you say what you say? Well, he says the Ola is all to God. It's entirely consumed on the Mizbeh. That's very important. And if you look at the Karbanos that are brought on Shavuot, on Atzeres, if you take a tally of them, it says that you bring 7 sheep and a par ben bakar and 2 elim, and those are olot. And then you bring 2 sheep as shlamim. Maybe I didn't get the comment. Meaning you bring a lot more olas than shlamim. So Shammai picked the one example where, for some reason, and he says and that's the precedent, and that's how you see that the Torah prioritizes here to be ola regel, right? The ola over the shlamim. And Beis Hill says so. So the Gemara says, so then why does Beis Hill prioritize the shlamim over the olos? So Beis Hill says that the shlamim that we bring for the re'iyah, for the to be ola regel, is the same shlamim that Am Yisrael brought at Har Sinai, right before the Aseret HaDibros, which is told about at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. After it tells the story of the Aseret HaDibros, that really they set up a couple of mizbeachs there according to the 12 tribes. And Moshe Rabbeinu, they brought zvachim and olos, and Moshe Rabbeinu poured blood on them, and there was a bris, and he wrote the first installment of the Chumash from Bereshit to Matan Torah, and that was. And over there, the shlamim were actually the shlam of Re'iyah, and the shlam of to be ola regel, and there was no mention of the olas Re'iyah there. So that's the precedent. So we see that the Torah prioritized that. And also, if you look at the story of the Nesiim, when they came to at the inauguration of the Mishkan, they brought a lot more shlamim than olos. So it seems that both Hill and Shammai have decided, for whatever reason, they're going to find their precedents. Why these are the precedents or whatever? So the Gemara says, why doesn't Shammai like what Hill said, and why doesn't Hill like what Shammai said? So first of all, Hill says, the fact that Shammai says that an olah is better because it's entirely on mizbeach, I argue, and I say a shlamim is better because there's 2 parties eating, and 2 parties is superior to everything that goes on mizbeach. Because God could be like, oh, that's very nice, you gave it all for me, but I'd have a lot more fun if we were eating now together, and that's a sign really of what it's all about, that we're celebrating some sort of misha, some sort of union, we're partying together. And therefore, you would prioritize the shlamim in this occasion here, because it's called shlamim, right? We talked about how it's called shlamim because it's oseh shalom between the baalim, right? The mizbeach gets some, the baal gets some, the kohen gets some. What a party, right? So that's number one. That's why he rejects. So certainly in olam hazeh, right? The shlamim over here for this kind of occasion is much more appropriate. It's even though you would agree that the olah is more kadosh, it's more sanctified, it's all to God, but it's really greater to have the shlamim. And the other reason is that he rejects, why pick on Shavuot? Because that's a karban tzibur. And we're not going to learn from a karban tzibur as a precedent for a karban yachid. And we know that the obligation to bring these karbanos on the regel is a karban yachid. Okay. Then the Gemara says, well, why doesn't Shammai like what Hill said? So Shammai says, you know what? It's true that shlamim were brought by Matan Torah. But there were also olos brought. And those olos were also the olos of Re'iyah. And therefore, you don't have a preference by Maimed Har Sinai, which is more, the olos of Shlam. We don't know. This Hill is giving me a very skewed version. He's saying only the Shlamim of Re'iyah were there, but also the olos were too. So the Gemara says, wait a second, why does Hill say that? So Hill says, no. Those olos by Har Sinai were not the olos of Re'iyah. Those were the olos of the olos HaTamid. The daily Talmud that we bring every morning and every afternoon actually didn't start at the inauguration of the Mishkan, where we have a lot of halachas that appear in order to be makom, but really they started that at Har Sinai. Okay, the Gemara gets into it back and forth. Do we say that these halachas were also given at Sinai and they only appear in Chumash for us by Olmod, and therefore they could have brought the olos, and why are they arguing? Why? Okay, so let's take a step back. This is not to address Karbanos in terms of animals or not. I just want to give you a back end of some of the considerations of what's going on here with the Karbanos and how they were used back then. First, to get that, think of this as an extension of everything we talked about until now, and to kind of inform a certain the conversation we're having. Okay, so why does Shammai pick on Shavuot as a precedent of all things. And Hill's right. You're picking on a carbon tzibor. How are we going to, right? And what does Matan Torah have anything to do with the idea to go to Beis HaMikdash, right? 3 times a year and bring a Karban Chagiga and a Olas Re'id. So it seems to be, from this Gemara, first of all, we could say for sure that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that the granddaddy of all being Ola Regel, the paradigm, and what introduced this whole concept, why it's possible, was Muhammad Har Sinai. Because he never had a greater face-to-face and the Gilui Shechina, right, coming together historically, and all future, the ability to have that experience, to go to Hashem's house now and visit him, right, is all because we're able to retain some sort of Hashrat and Shechina that happened at Maimon HaSinai. And with a Machane and a Mishkan, we're able to march in a temporary way, the Merkav the Shechina, until we got home, to where we could park it, the makom asher yivchar, in a permanent place that could be Hashem's home. And now we get to party there as like a permanent residence. But the precedent for all that was Maimon HaSinai, and therefore the Karbanos of Maimon HaSinai clearly are the primordial, or the primal versions, right, the early versions of what ends up becoming. Right. So that's certainly the shlam. For whatever reason, Beis Hillel learns that those olas were not the olas. But that's why he picks on Har Sinai. And Beis Shammai certainly agrees with them, except Beis Shammai is looking at Atzeres. Now it's interesting because Atzeres Shavuos in the Torah has nothing to do with Maimon Har Sinai at all. In fact, there's a machloket Tanaim. When did Har Sinai happen? Did it happen on the 6th of Sivan, the 7th of Sivan? And Shavuos by us is always the 7th of Sivan, a 6th, because the function of counting 50 days after the second day, Pesach, Mimachos HaShabbos. So, in according to whole Tanaic tradition, Shavuos has nothing to do with Matan Torah, it's not even on the same day. But, and the Torah, overtly in this week's parsha, in Emor, it never ever talks about a celebration of Kabbalah Torah or Matan Torah. And if we didn't say that in Yalav Yapo, we wouldn't know that. So, but there is a linkage there. We know that there is a dimension, there is a connection. Obviously, there is a deep connection. There's a reason why we say in Yalav Yapo that Zman Matan Torah Sena, and there is that. And it seems, I'm just saying it's not from the Torah, but it seems that maybe, I don't know for sure, but Beis Shammai is saying that we look at, even though it's true, it's a Karban Tzibor, but somehow it's a reflection of Maimon Har Sinai, and we look to that for those olos. Okay. Why would Beis Hillel pick on the Nesiim and say, when the Nesiim came to an argument, we'll look at that as a precedent for what the Torah prioritizes as a carbon by Aliyah L'Rega, right? Because the Nesiim, what are the Nesiim doing? The Nesiim in the inauguration of the Mishkan, which is to retain the Hashras Hashkim that happened in Maimon HaSinai. It's also the idea of a Beis HaMikdash. They're Nesiim, they're coming, they're giving input in what the Mishkan will be as a relationship, right, between their shvatim that they represent, or their station, rather. It wasn't on behalf of their shvatim, it was their station, that they could, right, that there is some sort of interface between the people and the Mishkan, right? And therefore their karbanos somehow also have to do with this idea of re'iyah, or being oila regel, or celebrating the fact that the Mishkan and the service is the center point in our relationship. So you see that I'm just talking about how you see that the Tanaim are trying to track the roots. There's so much spiritual things built out of the, it become the conventions and the rites and the halachos. Okay, so now if the Torah told me, now that's just, that the other side of this is, the ingredients. We're very, very specific about what kind of animal for what kind of thing and when and where. So all this was given to us from the Torah, right? The Rambam is the only one that I know that people like to cite in Moreh Nevuchim of all places. Okay, where he suggests an approach of Tamei HaMitzvot, right? Even though you're meant to relate to all mitzvahs on some level as chukim, because God decided that you should do this, and the value of it is only because God said, and by doing it, I'm connecting to God, right? It's not because in my mind I am qualifying it, right? And therefore deciding if it's going to do the job or not, and therefore whether it's worthwhile for me to engage in the act, right? It's God said it. That's really the value of a mitzvah. Even so, he says that's very important. Part of your relationship to a mitzvah is fostering a tam, some way that you can wrap your head around the meaning, the significance of the mitzvah. And he recommends a baseline, universal, rational approach that anybody could start from. And basically, it looks like he reduces all the dafka, the mitzvah, certainly the stuff that has to do, meaning why does God want karbanos? What does God need karbanos? So he'll say, obviously, if I'm asking you to bring a karban, it's because the nations in the world, right, in the age that you grew from, that you developed, the culture that was antithetical to what I want you to do, they did it like this. So now I'm going to give you a mitzvah to do the exact opposite. Case in point, everybody remembers that in Mitzrayim, we took the animal that they worshipped and we tied it around the bed. Just, why was that our karban? Just to put it in their eye and to undo this attachment that we may have absorbed from being in their culture, right? So the Rambam Kiseder, in that section of Moreh Nevuchim, he talks about specifically Avodah Karbanos as dafka, why that actual animal and why these sacrifices, just the same reason, so to speak, that we're commanded not to do molech, because that's what they did. So we're going to do the opposite. So that, but even
how is it the opposite? I mean, they did that too. They did
meaning because we live in an age where he's saying when we're going to make concessions to the human psyche, and they live in an age where they came out of sacrifices. So if they need to have sacrifices, we're going to give you sacrifices in a way that it's the exact opposite of the way everybody else does them. And
it's the exact opposite. It's exactly the same as the
I can't explain the Rambam. If you have questions on the Rambam, you can look at it. Meaning I'm just quoting, I'm saying that may be the source where people have this approach. And even the Rambam himself is suggesting something in the universe. He would never, I don't believe in a conversation with the Rambam, you would ever believe after reading that the Rambam would be telling you that this is the time of mitzvah that he believes, or that he even recommends. He's presenting something really as to enable Tamei mitzvahs. That's So because also it doesn't jive really with all the things he says in terms of he brings out much more strong, beautiful, deep reasons for things in his Yad HaChazaka that are totally would not jive with the approach in the Moreh Nevuchim. But I'm just saying, aside from that, that's why I love the Ramban and the Alshich are so good about pulling out how humans don't live in a vacuum. And it's not like where there's that reality is a theater, it's a stage, and it's inhabited by humans and ducks and the sun and buildings and a big old man in the sky. It's more like humanity is a microcosm of everything that he shares, all the other various expressions of God's oneness in the Bria that manifest in our world as almost discrete objects, discrete personalities, discrete, in our life, from down here, from Olam West, everything looks like pratiyut. But from the highest point of emanation that you can maybe try to imagine, it's all one. So a human being was built that he incorporates within him, like we talked about, mineral, vegetable, animal, and all, like the great animal in the sky, the astral goat, is really in human being. And the great palm tree, whatever, that's all in you. And you're doing the animal tremendous. So you are the Kohen of the whole Bria. So when you're bringing, the animals are basically all animal really is in you. And when you bring this particular organism, this expression of life, that, and spiritually, there's also the law of conservation of energy, but you're upgrading this thing. And it's actually giving for the whole chiyus of behema to exist by being mitake in your nefesh habahamis on behalf of all of Bria. And the way that Alshach portrays it, all these things are being upgraded and being, you're facilitating the journey for these pratim, which enables the great process of why God made the world. So it's not in a vacuum. It's not like when I go to the store and I buy something that looks pinkish and white that's shrink wrapped, and I don't even know that it might not even be an animal anymore. It might have grown in a test tube. I don't even know, printed. But people eat meat all the time and they make a shahakal and they don't even know that it was an animal once and like somebody cared for it. And, in the old days, I got friends that told me, I have one of my dearest friends, he grew up, he was born in DP camp. And he told me even in Canada when he was a kid, you knew the name. I mean, no, in those days, his mother was picking out chickens in the store, but you bought a chicken or you gave it to the shochet to shach it for you. But in Europe or even in America, in rural America, you raised the animal, it had a name, and then you ate it. And it's a much deeper experience. It's much more real, but they didn't have a problem eating it. It's not cruel, but I'm not talking about, even the Torah, there was a point in history when we were not allowed to eat meat for ourselves. Meat was prioritized for the Mizbeach, and we were allowed sacrifices before. It's not like we ate meat and they're like, okay, we have to do something holy with this also. we were given karbanos, and we were not given the right to eat till later because we really wanted it. So our whole relationship in this world, in this culture, I think a lot of what we're wrestling with is response specifically to givens that we take for granted, which are not the original pristine state of the Torah's mind. And that's why I'm just trying to peel back some layers to, invite us to think about this in a grander scope. I mean, there's a reason why God, from God's point of view. So anyway, I guess that's the best I could do.
So
Without further prompting.
last you mentioned everything is Hukim. So everything is Hukim. Now we know what we think. Some is Hukim, how is Mishpatim. In reality, every Mishpatim could be Hukim.
That's what we said in the beginning, right? On the level of Chum. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any questions, closing thoughts, suggestions for next time? Okay, I guess we did good or terrible. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
I'm not convinced.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
Yeah, sure.
That idea of the animals and the animals are representative of the kohot, which are in us, and they're bringing that, and just for me, like that. Okay, fine. I'm going home now.
When the animals in the future, are animals going to have?
It just wraps it up.
Are animals going to have bechira? If we're upgraded, are the animals going to be upgraded? Would an upgrade for them be bechira? Could they be conscious of self in the same way that they could take responsibility for their actions like we could? Could they be said to have take responsibility? Do they have agency? Like the idea of the animal choosing to dance up the kadosh.
Right.
What would it need to be able to feel that way? And does it not feel that way now? Could it feel that way? And is it upon us to feel that way for it? Like, what does it mean that it would have that consciousness? If it doesn't have that consciousness, why are we projecting? We are the consciousness of it. Meaning, let's boil this down. I think what's bothering you is reducing chiyut into chomer. We're taking the chiyut of a living creature and reducing it to fuel for our chiyut. For chomer, that's
what every time we eat meat.
Yeah, right. But anything really. Yeah. There's a cycle of life. It's okay.
I mean, with the Rambam, still, that it was a reaction to the sacrifices that were being done around the Avodah Zarah. The Avodah Zarah that's being done around us now has nothing to do with slaughtering animals, because everybody slaughters animals all the time. Like you said, we used to not eat, you used to only eat meat when it came from a korban or a chag.
The Avodah Zarah today is the most refined Avodah Zarah there is, which the Greeks invented, and that is when humans worship themselves. Exactly. And that means anything that you have can become an Avodah Zarah. And it's the most developed, evolved Avodah Zarah there is, because it has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. It's just taiva that replaced Avodah Zarah. So, for example, there used to be real Avodah Zarah. You have vestiges of that before, but not really. We read about Avodah Zarah, it seems very, very remote to us. And the Greeks said, no, there is none of that. There's just us. So whatever you make important to you is you. But the problem is, from our perspective, that's Avodah Zarah. Why? Because it becomes a focal point that takes a human being away from himself. So he's serving something that doesn't serve him. Right? That's what's called Elohim Acherim. Acherim la'ovdehem. They're zarim, they're strange. You're investing in something that doesn't recognize you. It's not built, it's just a fantasy. You think this is going to get you far in life, or for you, anything that's out of, not a function of the Eitz HaChaim, that's Eitz HaDas. That for us, we're already at the level of history. Like that's the Eitz, that's Avodah Zarah. So you're talking about something completely different. Like Avodah Zarah that the Rambam was talking about is like the Aztecs.
Yeah, but how will
which I hear is still around today.
Slaughtering animals affect that Avodah Zarah? That's the Avodah Zarah.
That's today. Why I'm saying that the only source they have that side of the argument. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that. I mean that position. People that are vocal. Yeah, because I'm sorry. Okay, but I'm saying that position. I think the only thing I've ever heard quoted is or alluded to is the Rambam, and I'm saying at best you have to, because of all the things I'm saying and you're saying, like it's hard to you put it in a box somewhere and figure out how to relate to it, because it's hard to.
It's also to me it's belittling of Hashem.
It seems reductionist.
Yeah, but Hashem has a nose. No, doesn't even have a face. Never mind a nose. So why is it Reach Nechoah appealing?
Are you
to
sure?
Hashem?
Are you sure?
That's what we're told, that ain't panim,
I'm pretty sure it says all the time God has face. It says Moshe Ben talk to face to face. It says Lo Yuras Panei Rekom. It says Panei Hashem. Does God have eyes?
And
Does God have eyes?
we were made in God's image.
What does
so
that
we
mean?
know some
Okay, one second. Okay, you're asking amazing things. So
It's bringing us down to our
Well,
size.
no. If I wrote the Torah, you'd be 100% right. But if I'm supposed to understand that God wrote the Torah, who said that he has a face? I didn't say it. He said it. So now here's
to say that his face is like ours is backwards.
Nobody said that. Wait a second. There's a lot of assumptions here that I can understand why you feel the way you do. So, but I invite you to look at this one. Okay, give me a second. Okay. Imagine there's no such thing as a face. And then God invented a face. And he said, hey, I invented the concept. I invented the word. So let me use it, okay? And we say, okay. And he says, by the way, that thing you have to do is a face. We're like, okay. Then one day I'll be like, one second. How do you say I have a face? Because I know I'm nothing like you. So if I have a face, you for sure don't have a face. Oh, but God said I have. Oh, so wait a second. Whose face is the real face? What does it mean? B'tzalmenu b'dmutei.
Right.
There is such a thing as a face. Our face, you're right, is the demut to a real face. Does God have a face? Like everything you know about your face, okay, you have to know what's about your face is like God's face and what's not. So obviously, right, so, but God is saying, relate to me as if I have a face. And mi bisari echazeh aloha, it says in Eov. And the Avot, from their purified form, they were able to divine who God was. So obviously, the Rambam starts off, he's dealing with people, that are familiar with Aristotle and Plato, and they live in a secular West. And he says, listen, anthropomorphism is a big problem because you're going to think that we're making God very small. So I want to tell you, it doesn't make God small at all. And his approach is poetry, man. Okay, Khalila, I don't mean to, but I'm just saying a lot of people think that that's what he's saying. He's saying, no, really, Hashem is giving you a way to relate to him. It's from God, but it's not the Mekubalim show. And that's the Rambam just over there. But the Mekubalim, who are not concerned with packaging a message, when they talk to you directly, they say, the approach is, all this stuff is made up. God made it up. We are a reflection. So you're supposed to understand, meaning if you're coming from God's perspective. So for example, when it says, Ein Hashem, or Einei Hashem, Psukim, the Zohar Kadosh and Sefer Ditzniuta and the Idra will explain how God is literally telling you how the nature of a certain level of Hishtalshalut of the Bria works and how the Hanhaga is, so that you can learn Midot from him and you can learn who he is. And his mamish chose these forms to express himself. The God we're relating to outside of Bria, the God we're relating to is the God outside of Bria. And yet we recognize that the only means we were given, that were ratified by him, sanctified by him to relate, was forms that he chose and a personality that he chose. Not incidental, he chose them. We're not going to say he's not bigger than them, but he chose them to interface with us, that should be the means that we use to relate to him. So that's why if I started off on what you're saying is absolutely true on a certain level of reality, and yet you don't want to close the door to all this. The Torah is telling you so much more when you engage in it like that, right? So I want to put both perspectives on the table, and then we're saying, wow, what does it mean that God has an eye? What does it mean in the Gemara Chagiga when it says that just like God has two eyes, you need to have two eyes to be Ola Regel, and if you're blind in one of your eyes, you're potter. Why does God have two eyes? What does that even mean? But the Mekubalim will explain to you that on a certain level of reality, you have to know that God employs two methods of vision. And he knows when to use the right eye and the left eye. And when there's a giving eye, and when there's an ayin tova, and when you focus on the prat, and when you focus on the klal. And these are actually expressed, that we say, in the physical form of a human being, that these concepts have yeshtashus, so that we can know that we're directly relating to God in our use of our eyes. All that approach and all that reality of our avodah and would be lost if we would be content with talking about Torah as in terms of religion and religious issues that come up, and religion vis-a-vis other religions, and we have to keep it because God said, okay, you need a religion, so we'll give you a religion, so you have Karbanot. On that level, religion is a glass ceiling for the human soul. The Torah is so much more than that. What you and I are left with nowadays, we're used to it as a religion, we engage in religion. I think that's a lot of the dross that we're trying to cut through. So I just want to, meaning, I think there's a lot here to think about. I think we opened up some things, I'm not. Yeah, I've said what I have to say.
I'm with you 100%. My fear is taking the metaphor literally.
Yeah, we're worried about people making God small. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
And there are forms, like in Plato, like forms, there's a form,
Right.
it's not.
So religion is just put Hashem in a box, what you call religion.
So I understand,
It's
the
There's
concept
some
of
people that think God is
put
Ashkenazi.
Hashem in a box and that's called religion.
He's
There
not.
is no religion, there is Hashem, that's it. There's a house of the box. If you put everything in the boxes, then
My
we
son,
are
on the
like,
other hand, is a Cohen and he can't wait.
like what Rabbi said, what you talk water from the ocean. We call this still ocean, so we call ocean in the drop. So we are Hashem.
Now we have to wait and see.
Mamlok.
We are Hashem in the drop. So we need to understand.
All right.